Hi, so today we are going to talk about the all-important amendments. Now, so we're going to break this into two different videos, and we're going to have the first 10 amendments, and then we're going to talk about the other 17. So first and foremost, we really should review a little bit. So we have to go back, and we have to talk about how we had our founding fathers, which were arguing about. Once we got the Constitution set up, we had a group of people, the Federalists on one side, and then we had our Anti-Federalists. And our Federalists were the ones who feared a weak government. They were very concerned that they would have something like Shays' Rebellion again, which was just a recap. Nobody could stop him, and he could do whatever he wanted to do because he was upset about the state taxation purposes. So the Federalists really liked the idea of federalism, the idea of giving the federal government power, like they would be the ones with the most power. However, the states would also be able to decide things. Now, the Federalists said that we did not need a Bill of Rights. I hope you make a note of that. We do not need a Bill of Rights, the Federalists said. They said it would be dangerous to do so. Now, our Anti-Federalists feared a strong government. They were terrified they were going to have tyranny again, tyranny being an abuse of power, and they really emphasized the idea of having state rights, that states should be more powerful. So our Anti-Federalists absolutely refused to ratify the Constitution. Take a note to write down what the word ratify means. They refused to ratify the Constitution until a Bill of Rights was passed. They wanted to ensure that none of the rights would be taken away from the citizens. So James Madison ends up proposing the Bill of Rights. Now, these are our first 10 amendments. And now he actually proposed, I believe it was about 17 originally, 12 were actually considered, and then 10 were ratified, with the whole intent that they were supposed to protect individual liberties of citizens. And all 10 of these were ratified. Finally, the last state to ratify these, that you had to have 9 out of 13 in order to ratify it, and that was Virginia, and on December 15th, 1791. So we're going to do the Bill of Rights in this video first. So we're going to start with our very first one. Now, this is the one that people typically, if they're asked, hey, what are your rights? They will give some of these. So Amendment 1 it's got 5 basic rights, and I've made a way for you to remember these 5 over here. If you see, I've made the word RAPS. So we have the freedom of religion, and that means that you have the freedom to worship as you will. However, you cannot harm somebody for your religion. It's important to note that. Assembly means that you have the freedom to gather, and we can learn about things, we can have meetings, we can get together and just sit around a fire, which is something people couldn't do back in the day. Just gather. I'm sorry for my cats. You have to forgive me. Or forgive my cats, not me. So the third one, it would be that we have freedom of press, and that means that we have newspapers and magazines, and people can write about things on the internet now. So the freedom of press is pretty important. Petition means that you have the right to petition your government and to ask them for to let them know your grievances or any of your concerns. And then we have freedom of speech, that you can express yourself. Now, every single one of these, just like where I explained with the first one, there are limitations on it. You cannot assemble in the middle of a highway, for example, because you would be putting yourself as well as other people in jeopardy. Freedom of press has limitations on it. You cannot commit libel, which is spelled, if you're ready, L-I-B-E-L, or slander. Slander is when you say a lie, and libel is when you write a lie. And you are not able to do that. That's why you can always look at tabloids, and newspapers have, where they'll write things like, Britney Spears has cellulite. Well, of course she does. Everybody has cellulite. So it's not a lie that she has that, but it's still enough that probably would be frustrating to somebody, but there's absolutely nothing she can do about it. Petition, you can tell the government your concerns, however, you cannot threaten them. Anytime, for example, a president receives a letter threatening them, which they do all the time apparently, the FBI investigates those threats. Freedom of speech, so that you can, while you can express yourself, there's also limitations on that. Something like censorship. TV and radio, for example, are censored. Um, the Amendment 2 would be the right to bear arms, and I always draw for my students a bear, which bear looks a lot better than mine, but a bear, and give him 2 arms because you can bear arms, and that means they've got 2 because it's Amendment 2. Amendment 3 says that soldiers were not allowed to live in people's homes like they had been allowed to do prior to the Boston Massacre. And so the way to remember this one is Amendment 3, ain't no soldier going to live with me. Amendment 4 says that you have to have a warrant before the government can search and then seize, which means to take your property. The way to remember this one is Amendment 4, shut the door, unless they have a warrant, of course. So Amendment 4, of course, you have to have a warrant for anything like a home or a business or a person if you're going to have an arrest warrant, if you know where somebody's at. However, if you can get arrested without a warrant if you're causing harm to somebody in that moment. Or they don't have to have a warrant to search your car on the side of a highway because they're not going to tell you to stay here and I'm going to go get a warrant. Because there's something called probable cause, and Amendment 4 has become a lot bigger and since the 70s than it used to be. Amendment 5 has 5 parts, and so I always draw a hand for this one. So if you will, draw a basic hand. And so the thumb is the grand jury, and the grand jury says that you must be indicted, which means that there has to be enough evidence before you can go to your official trial. So a grand jury is not looking for did you do it or not do it, but so much as is there enough evidence to even start the process. Now this is only done at the federal level. It's not done by the state level unless it's in the state laws. The second finger, which would be double jeopardy, and double jeopardy says you cannot be convicted twice for the same crime. A perfect example would be O.J. Simpson. So O.J. Simpson was accused of killing his wife and her friend in quotation marks. He was accused of this, and then he actually had a grand jury, which said that there was enough evidence because the glove was a big deal whenever they did this, and there was actually a saying like if the glove doesn't fit, then you have to acquit. Acquit means you have to find him innocent, and the glove did not fit, so the jury found him innocent for killing for being accused of killing his wife and her friend. But then he later wrote a book called If I Did It, and he describes how the murder went down, which is incredibly suspicious. However, Double Jeopardy says he cannot be convicted for that crime because he was already found innocent. Now, if you're found guilty of the crime, then you can be tried again in the hopes that you could be found innocent. But he was found innocent, so you can't do that. The middle finger would be that the government can take your property as long as they provide you with fair compensation. So say they wanted to build a highway through the land that my house sits on, then they legally can do that. They can come up to me and they can offer me the value for my home, and I need to move, would be what would happen. Due process, kind of like I do, because this is the ring finger. You must be treated equally. So like I do due process, everybody has to be treated the same. And then the fifth finger would be plead the fifth, that you don't have to self-incriminate. And what that means is you don't have to tell on yourself. So that say you and a friend of yours you were hanging out late at night, and your friend did, say they graffitied a stop sign. Now, while you did not participate, you did buy the spray paint, which means you're an accessory. So when the police later, they pull you and your friend in, and they're questioning your friend, and then they come to you in your own little cubicle, and they start asking you, you can say, I plead the fifth. And what that says is that you have evidence, or you have testimony that would help the police. However, if you tell them, then that means you're going to get yourself in trouble. A lot of people use plead the fifth incorrectly. They'll say, I plead the fifth, and when they didn't do anything wrong, they just don't want to tell anything, and that's not how it works. Once you plead the fifth, then you're saying, hey, I did something wrong, and if I tell you, then I'm going to get in trouble too. So if we back out, if we back out and look at this, we've got the grandest finger of all. That's our grand jury. Our second finger would be double jeopardy. Here's the government flipping you off, saying eminent domain. Here's the ring finger, I do, due process. And then we have the fifth finger, which is plead the fifth. Hopefully you drew that out. And then we have the Speedy Six. Speedy Six says that you have the right to a speedy trial with a speedy public trial with a lawyer. That's what the briefcase is for. And you have the right to chase after witnesses with your Speedy Six. Amendment 7 says that you have the right to have a jury in a civil suit if you're suing somebody for over $20. So hopefully you've heard of Robin Thicke and Pharrell Williams. They actually had a lawsuit because Robin Thicke and Pharrell Williams had a song together in which they proceeded to use the the melody, the tune from a Marvin Gaye song. And so now Marvin Gaye is dead. However, his family, the Gaye family, sued on behalf, and they won the case, saying because they had Robin Thicke and Pharrell Williams had used lyrics and used the melody without permission. You can do this, like say the person who spilled a cup of hot coffee on him from the McDonald's drive-through window. And he can claim he didn't know the coffee was hot and he received third-degree burns. As long as the case was over $20, which I believe today is $1,500. They've increased it since 1791. You can have a jury trial. Now, if it's less than $20 or $1,500 today, then you would have something that would look like a Judge Judy type thing. Although Judge Judy is not a real lawyer, but that's what it would be similar to. Sorry, I didn't mean to say Judge Judy lawyer. Judge Judy's not a real judge. Anyway, Amendment 8 says that there's no cruel and unusual punishment, and that stems from the idea of back in the day, if you sassed your parents, you could be whipped in the town square. Or if you stole from the king, you would have your hand chopped off. Or something along those lines, something that we would see today as being cruel and excessive. It also says no excessive bail. So if you've ever heard of you're having to post bail, so that you don't have to spend too much time in jail overnight, you can go ahead, like a judge will say that your bail is $1,000. And if you can post it, if you can go ahead and pay that amount, you can go ahead and get out so that you don't have to spend the night in jail. However, you're going to want to get your money back. And so you'll get your $1,000 back or a percentage of it, because sometimes you'll only have to pay a percentage of the bail. You'll get whatever you posted. You'll get it back as long as you return to court. Now, if you don't return to court, then that money is lost to you. So the way to remember Amendment 8 is that you've got kind of an 8 and he's behind bars, jail. And if you squint at it, it might kind of sort of look like a dollar sign, which would be your bail. Now, I did forget to mention 7. So 7 civil is the way that I remember this. 7 sounds like civil. Civil sounds like 7. They just go together in my mind. All right, so there's 8. No cruel punishment. And then Amendment 9. Amendment 9 would be that people have other rights not listed in the Constitution. Like you have the right to privacy. Abortion is typically allowed under Amendment 9 because it says that the government should not have the right to interfere into your medical records. The right to your medical records, that would be, sorry, I just said that. Let's see, the right to own a car, the right to have a dog, the right to, purchase property, all of that you have rights not listed in the Constitution. They didn't want to shut it down. and just that you just have these 10 rights. So this one's kind of wide open for what our other rights are. So the way that I remember this one is we take a 9 and you turn it over, and then when you do, it looks kind of like a P, which stands for people's other rights. And then Amendment 10, the final of the Bill of Rights, would be that states have rights that are not listed in the Constitution. Again, they didn't want to shut the door and cap what states could do. So, like, states can decide things like marijuana, or states can decide things like gay marriage, abortion rights. States can make decisions. What are the qualifications to be a hairdresser in the state of North Carolina is different than it is in Nebraska, for example. And so states can have all these extra rights. All right, so that brings us to the end of the Bill of Rights. If you have any questions, you can feel free to let me know.